Hey guys, this is DFD, aka Dark Crimson Depths, and I'm going to go over half of the Guardian raids that we have right now. Because we just started getting Guardian raids, we're about due to get another one. I think it might be either Thunder or Fire. I forgot which one's going to be next. But right now we have half of the Guardian raids, so I'm going to go over the ones that we have right now. Because these can actually be very, very tricky fights. And if you know what to do, it's possible to solo them with a very strong grid. I know I can pretty much solo the Wind Guardian and the Dark Guardian. I've even got video of the Dark Guardian, me doing it on my own. But there's different things you have to really pay attention to, and I'm going to go over all of that. But first things first, I don't know if it's still rank 90 to start these raids, because it'll make it a little bit easier to do it later down the line. But just to be safe, try to get rank 90 in order to try and start your own raids. Otherwise, jump into somebody else's. If you are trying to start them, you need Regalia from the Ultimate Catastrophes. You may even find Regalia in Ragnarok Catastrophe and other Guardian raids. There's a chance all of it will get sent as rewards. So just do multiple raids at ult level or higher, and you'll probably get some Regalia, or even a Fragments to trade for them. Now, these raids specifically give you treasures. These treasures are pretty much Regalia version 2, if you really want to be honest. These will be traded for a nice number of things, in fact. The most important things they trade for is the Guardian Adolans themselves, because you can indeed recruit them with enough items. This will take both treasures and Cavis. You get Cavis from Ragnarok Catastrophes. You can even get Cavis fragments from Ragnarok Catastrophes or the Guardian raids as well. But you need to get Cavis and treasures in order to get these Guardians. I am using one for my light team. These Guardians are stupidly strong, even if in sub-slots, because a lot of them have some very good buffs that get even stronger the more you break limit them. Using them as a main can arguably be the second best, or even with the right grid, best Idolan in the game for a main Idolan. Because what it will do is take your grid, your weapons grid, and multiply its general overall effectiveness by a certain percentage. So say you have like 100% assault, 100% defender, 100% exceed, all of that's going up by 1.2 just by getting a Guardian. Meaning it's pretty much going to turn 100% into 120%, it will turn 200% into 240%, so on and so forth. And it gets stronger when they break limit, up to 40% increase. So going by that perspective, say somebody does manage to get to 200% assault, and they have a maxed out Guardian, that's going to be a massive 280% assault. Yeah, it's that strong. With the right setups, you might even get a better damage output using them and a 100% Idolan compared to using 200% Idolan. So either way, they're worth going after. Not to mention, there's more scenes too, so you might as well. But keep in mind, the Cavis is the hardest part with getting the Guardians, because you're going to need Cavis for other things. Most importantly, getting more accessory slots for your characters, so it's up to you on that. Other reward you can get that's very, very important, Guardian weapons. A lot of these are very easy access. You can keep getting them you can get them every single raid if you're lucky, but nobody's really that lucky. But you can get them as raid drops. You can trade for them with just treasures, nothing else, just treasures. And they restock every month too. It just gets harder and harder each additional trade, but if you really want to do it the patient method, then buy 1 or maybe 2 copies a month and then wait for it to reset. That way you're not giving that many treasures to it. You might even get lucky and find extra copies anyway and not even have to spend a treasure for them. So there's that too. But they're all very, very strong. Each and every single one of those Guardian weapons come with 2 effects, even 3 effects sometimes. Like there's currently a wind weapon that gives 2 versions of Pride and a Defender. There's a light weapon I'm using that gives a Defender, an Ascension, and a Vigor. The only catch is that these Guardian weapons are much harder to skill level. They have triple the leveling requirements. So that can be very tedious, but it is definitely worth it. They also help if you have Phantom weapons too, because you can pretty much get whatever Phantom weapon grid you want if you farm enough of these. So that's the thing. Now, these fights is going to be very, very long. Unless you are insanely strong, or just have the right team that can pretty much just make it a joke, you're going to have a long fight ahead of you. Each and every last one of these Guardians has at least 200 million HP, and it can go up to 300 million. So these are very, very long fights. Definitely try to bring help, unless you really feel like you can solo it. If you could solo it, more power to you. The way I say it, there's nothing special about being able to solo it, but it does show how strong your team has come. But the main thing is that you want to be able to clear these Guardian fights, because they are very, very long, they are very, very time consuming. Now, when you start a Guardian and you invite other people, there's one interesting little mechanic that's different from the other raids. If you notice in previous raids, there's triggers that would happen based on how many players are in there. From what I've noticed, all the Guardians have some little counter mechanic to that, so do not worry about that. So some of the triggers that they do, like clearing their debuffs or putting a plethora of buffs on themselves, they only do it once and only once, so that's something good. Now, I can look at these other raids really quick, but I'm not going to go into full details. When we get the fire one, it's 230 million. When we get the water one, it's going to be 210 million. All these raids also tend to have a very good amount of debuff resistance, except for one, I've noticed. It might be a second one, I'm not fully sure. But one for sure definitely has a lower debuff resistance, so that's something to know. And all of them have a defense value of 10. That's a normal defense value in the game. So that's the thing with that. Now, going into stuff, this Wind Guardian, she's a very interesting one, because remember how I said a lot of them typically have high resistance to debuffs? This one doesn't. This one has very, very low resistance to debuffs, and that's where it comes really into play. So what she does is very, very scripted, because she's got so many triggers that it pretty much dictates all of her turns, if you know what you're doing. So first and foremost, when she has no orbs for her charge meter, she will hit everybody and do up to a 4-turn poison. That's 1,000 damage per turn. When she has one orb, it's instead an AoE attack down. And keep in mind, she's always doing AoE damage except for in some very specific situations. When she has 2 orbs, AoE darkness. 3 orbs, AoE defense down. Everything but the poison seems to be 3 turns too. Keep that in mind. When her HP is at half and she's not in the stun, she'll clear all her debuffs. Just once, period. Now, when she has full orbs in normal mode, she'll randomly hit you 3 times and then do a 2-turn paralysis. This could be a little bit tricky and dangerous, because she may target the same person with paralysis more than once. So if you have something that outright blocks debuffs, this can still possibly get past it. But the other one is just putting corruption damage on everybody, and it's only 850 damage per turn. But the trick with both of these is the fact that it deals damage based on the number of debuffs you have on yourself. So if you have anyone or anything that can remove debuffs from yourself or even resist against it, bring it. It really helps in this fight. It will make her damage near pointless. I'm not even kidding. With the right setup, she will not do much of crap to you. So if you got stuff that will resist debuffs or stuff that will remove them, for one, I can put Vivian's Cleanse skill on my soul, bring a white Kamihime named soul, who's arguably the best healer in the game. That can remove 3 debuffs right there. So that's something important. The biggest thing that I could say is that if she's in stun, or if you did manage to get the skill, I think it's called Black Propaganda, or there's some Kamihime that can do something like it. If you can increase her maximum charge gauge, which means it will take another turn before she uses her full orb nukes. If you do that and she's in 4 orbs, then she'll just do a normal hit. Otherwise, she'll save her normal hits for stun. It's for that reason why blind is nearly useless. So don't really worry too much about putting blind on her, because her triggers pretty much guarantee hits. It's just not guaranteeing the debuffs. Now, to push this even further, if you have anybody that can manipulate her orb count and all that too, you can make it so she has 5 orbs before she nukes, remove 1 orb, and you're taking another normal hit. That will delay even more of her debuffs landing on you, and even waste some of them away. That strategy, using Vivian's Cleanse, Soul as a healer, and then Awaken Raphael, I've managed to manipulate this so she will almost never really keep her debuffs on me longer than a turn. So that's something very important with all that. Speaking of debuffs, because of the fact that you can debuff her pretty easily, it is not too far-fetched to actually land a lot of the harder stuff pretty frequently. I've seen Paralyze land on her a lot, I've seen Dizzy land on her a lot. Blind only really works if she has 4 orbs or stun, but doesn't have it full. So there's a lot of different methods you can really take with the debuffs, but all I can say is it's very, very easy to lower her attack power and defense power. So that's something you should take advantage of. If you really want to abuse it further, get something that reduces debuff resistance even further, like Vicissitudes of Fortune, because Mordra is very good for this fight, actually. And then even go a step further and get some elemental resistance towards your team, whereas, say you have Fire Kamihime, lower her fire resistance. That's going to maximize the chances you land debuffs, pretty much. And it is so abusable at that point. I've seen it a lot on my light team, where I can get Raphael's Dizzy to land so very often it's scary. So that's something to know. This fight is very, very abusable. This is probably the easiest of the Guardians, if you ask me. But it's just the fact that she has a lot of HP. She has 250 million. That's the second highest HP you'll see among the Guardians. That's probably to compensate for the fact of how easy she can be. You can very easily manipulate her. If you have one healer, you could probably still do this. Because generally in these raids, you may want to have other people helping out with heals and damage cuts. You don't really need too much of that here. If you have control over the buffs and the debuffs that you have and you give and everything, then you're good to go. Simple as that. Now, Thunder, I'm not going to look over unless we get it, so there's that too. But 220 million, pretty much. This one is one that gives a lot of people trouble. The Light Guardian. Now, her debuff resistance is pretty high, so is the debuff resistance of the Dark one as well, which we'll cover pretty soon. This one has the second lowest HP among the Guardians, but it doesn't make her any easier. She has 210 million HP. And it takes her 2 orbs before she nukes, so my suggestion to you is to absolutely bring something that will extend the orb count. You will definitely see in a second, because she's a very dangerous one. And try your hardest to get attack down on her, if anything. Trust me on this. Lower her attack damage as much as possible. That said, you may want some damage cuts, you may want a lot of healers in the raid. You definitely want to try and increase her maximum orb count and even have somebody to possibly lower the current amount. So turn control is very, very powerful here. Not to mention, it can help a little bit if you can reduce her raging meters a little bit faster, but I found that I don't necessarily need it. It's more just reducing the damage you take, though. But the faster you can get her in the stun, the bigger the breather you get, basically. And definitely try to extend her stun if you can. I haven't had one that does it. But that's the whole thing with all of that. It's very difficult to stay alive in this if you're not taking control of how much damage he can do. Speaking of which, when she hits you with either a normal or a raging nuke, it is very, very important to remove the debuff she puts on you. Because if you are getting hit with her normal nuke and she's still in normal mode, don't have that defense down on you. Likewise, don't have the light resistance down on you when she's in raging. If either one of those is on any one Kamihime, she will follow up with another nuke that will deal even more damage. So she's pretty much hitting you with 2 overdrives. So that's the thing you really don't want. She is pretty much hitting you with 2 overdrives and it hurts. The normal one is another AoE hit. The raging one is 7 random hits. And to make it even worse, when her HP goes down to half and she's maxed out on charge turns, she will hit you with another nuke that deals 6 random hits, and these hits are harder. That's where you probably want damage cut. So when her HP is half, it's getting pretty dangerous. Not to mention, when her HP is half, she'll also remove all of her buffs, all of her debuffs, and put 3 attack buffs on herself. Now, I'm not sure how much of a difference these attack buffs really make, but just to be safe instead of sorry, try to remove those as soon as possible. I don't know how long they last. I don't know if they will be permanent, but it's best to get rid of that. Again, take as little damage as possible. So if you have control over all that, this raid isn't that hard, but it still can be pretty tedious. And I will say this without a doubt, do not ever try to auto this raid. There are people that try to go into auto ability or auto attack or whatever. Do not auto this raid. You will die fast. She has countered so many auto players. It's ridiculous. Especially considering the fact that you're getting double nuked. Because if you don't bring anything to remove debuffs off yourself, you're getting double nuked. If I was to say anything that's of top tier importance, you need these 4 things actually. Turn control, any sort of damage resistance or healing, and attack debuffs count for that one. Something to remove debuffs off of yourself, and something to remove buffs off of her. You need quite a few things for this. But it can be very, very worthwhile if you finish this fight anyways, because those that are light mains have some pretty good access to a lot of different stuff. You might even have the staff grids from previous Union events. Well, one of her weapons happens to be another staff, and it's pretty strong. It doesn't give assault, and instead gives vigor, but it's going to make your staff grid even further. Go figure. But anyways, the Dark Guardian, which is the other reason why you might want to fight the Light Guardian too. It's vice versa, because some people do main Dark teams. But the Dark Guardian, lowest HP among all the Guardians. She has 200 million. She can be a little tricky, but if you know what to do, that makes her a lot easier. In my opinion, she's the 2nd easiest Guardian right now. But what she'll do, when she hits full orbs for her normal nuke, it's going to be 3 random hits. When it's raging, it's going to be AoE, and it's going to reduce all your burst gauges by 30. So keep that in mind. She's mainly trying to counter your bursts if you really want to be honest, because normal mode is not too much of a problem. When she gets into raging mode and when her HP starts getting low, that's where it starts getting a little bit tricky. So here's the other thing about that. When she first enters raging mode, she'll buff her attack with a buff that will go away over time. So even if you can't remove it, it will eventually go away. But she'll give herself permanent combo rate buffs that you have to remove. If you don't remove them, they will stay up forever. Now, when she gets 40% HP or less, this is where it gets a little bit trickier. She'll increase her darkness attack. In other words, her dark elemental attack. So it's like the counter to the attack thing. If both of these are up at the same time, she can start doing a lot of damage, so be very careful with that one. But the more important thing is the fact that she gets additional effects whenever she combos, and these also do not go away on their own. You have to remove them. Not to mention, it seems she'll put a resistance debuff on herself against abnormal states, so that means you'll be having an easier chance to debuff her. It will stack with other stuff too. So if she goes into any of her triggers, she'll put a debuff resistance reduction on herself, so take full advantage of that. But the thing with the 40% HP triggers is the fact that she'll put 2 little skulls on her, basically. The white skull, whenever she double attacks somebody, their burst gauge goes down by 30. And the black skull, whenever she triple attacks somebody, she'll give them a 2-turn paralysis. That's where it's a little bit tricky. If you can remove those as soon as possible, don't even worry about it. If you can't, then arguably the double attack is a much better situation, because you don't want your characters to be getting paralyzed for like 2 turns. It can take up to 2 or even 3 people out of it. So be very, very careful with that. Now, when it comes to pretty much fighting her, it's like the same general approach as the Light Guardian, only to a lesser extent. You may or may not need to reduce the damage she takes, but still by all means reduce her attack power as much as possible. You will need to have possibly a bit of turn control if you're worried about your burst gauges getting drained. But at the same time, the biggest thing is being able to remove debuffs off yourself, just in case that paralysis hits, and remove buffs off of her. Removing buffs off of her is probably the most important thing. Otherwise, she'll have a permanent combo up with the permanent skeleton buffs. So that said, try to get her debuffs off of her. Try to get buffs off of her as much as possible. Try to land debuffs on her, especially when she reduces her own resistance. And pay very close attention to your burst gauges. Honestly, it might be a better situation if you're trying to keep up with damage racing, where you just let off your burst early if you know she's going to drain your whole team of it. So that's something to know. But anyways, that's pretty much it for all of that. There's one more Guardian that will come out eventually, and that will be a Phantom one. That will be the first Phantom Element raid we really had that's permanent. And she has the most HP, and she even has a level 110 instead of level 100. But I'll go over that when that happens too. It's going to be the very last one, but she's going to be a very dangerous one too, from what I've seen. Because you absolutely will need damage cut for the Phantom one. But anyways, that's all for that. Now, as for rewards that you can get from these raids and everything, I did mention that you get the SSR weapons. I did mention that you get the Guardian Add-ons. There's those. There's other things you can trade for in the raid shop too, because it's in a specific treasure exchange shop. If you get enough fragments, you can trade for more treasures too. Keep that in mind, but there's a limit on how many you can do for that one, so it'll eventually start getting more and more expensive. My suggestion to you, only stick to 10, maybe 20 per trade. The weapons themselves can actually be pretty useful. Every single weapon does have at least some use, but not everybody's really going to go after them. But I'll go over all the weapons right now, in fact. And I'll also go over them again when I do the other half of this video. But for fire, there's an axe that will give you Pride and Exceed, always welcome. For the staff, it will be Assault Defender, which is interesting for a staff. So Fire Staff Grade will come with Ascension and a lot of Assault Defender. There you go. And hammer is Elaborate and Vigorous. Now, what makes this interesting is the fact that Vigorous works like Assault, but in a different multiplier, but it also has the same effect as Pride, but in reverse. What that means is, it will amplify your attack power, but when your HP is higher. So when you're max HP, like completely full, topped up, Vigor is in its fullest effect. When your current HP is cut in half, then Vigor is gone. But this can lead to a lot of damage if you use it right. So this can possibly help amplify Hammer Grid, because you're already getting like 30% assault if you get that weapon. But there you go. Now, this water spear, which is lance for us, I forget what sprout is, but we can take a quick look at it. Oh, I see. This is Defender Ascension. I mean, Vigor Ascension, that's what it is. But it also comes with Assault. So, this is practically an Assault Vigor weapon mixed with Ascension. Quite frankly, I suggest people should get this. Because the Lance Grade is also pretty good. So, that's going to be a very, very good weapon to go after. Water tends to have very good weapons across the board anyways. Speaking of which, Water Axe, Pride Strength, I know what that is. Pride effect pretty much acts like Assault, only if as your HP drops, it gives more. Strength is Assault plus Defender. So you practically get 2 Assaults and a Defender right there. Now, the Bow, which is also pretty good. This one is Exceed and Avalanche, which gives you more Exceed damage. I do believe Avalanche was a combo rate increase. And that is very, very good, if you ask me, because of the fact that you'll deal a lot more combos, and you'll also get more burst performance. And hey, guess what? Combos is how you fill up the burst gauge faster. So, honestly, used right, that bow can actually be pretty good. My suggestion to you is maybe get 1 or 2 of them, though. I wouldn't try to make a full grid out of bow weapons with this, but if you do, you'll probably max out your Exceed anyways in your combo rate. You're just going to suffer from low damage. But 1 or 2 of these isn't too bad to really have. Because again, combo rate and more burst power. Now, this one, I know for a fact that this is a glaive, even though it looks like a scythe. If you ask me, they probably should have made the scythe weapons work like axes or spears. Or lances, actually, because we don't name them spears. But it's a pride, a large pride, and Stow is actually a small pride with small defender. So you're pretty much getting 2 prides and a defender. This is one of the rare cases where you ever see 2 prides. But again, it's practically like 2 assaults and a defender, basically. Worth getting. The Wind Bow, Assault Exceed, self-explanatory, very, very good. This arcane weapon right here for them is Vigor and Ascension. It's pretty much a very good combo because of the fact that Vigor, you want to keep your HP high, and Ascension helps you do so. So, there you go for that one. Ascension increases your healing, and of course, you want your HP to stay high. So, there's that. Thunder has got a Lance. Pride and Avalanche. This could be arguably better than the previous one we've seen that had Avalanche because of the fact that it is practically Assault plus combo rate. So this could be arguably better compared to the water counterpart for its bow. But it definitely does seem worth it because again, more combo rate across the board because it's increasing double and triple, keep that in mind, along with more attack power. This hammer for Thunder, it's Defender and Slug. Now, I forget exactly what Slug was, but I remember it being a pretty good effect. Yeah, attack power and critical. So it is Assault plus Stinger, along with Defender. My suggestion to you is to probably try to make a hammer grid out of this, because it will greatly help. Thunder hammer grid out of this is pretty good, because it's going to give you a lot of HP, it's going to give you quite a massive amount of assault, and if you're fighting a water enemy, you're going to deal a lot of stinger damage. So, you could make a hammer grid out of that. Now, Thunder Gun is going to be Assault and Sprout. If you remember correctly, a Sprout effect is pretty much Ascension plus Vigor, along with Assault. Thunder has it as well. So, you could definitely make a gun grid out of it. Just keep in mind the Phantom Gun is going to give you more HP. So, there's that. Light, its weapons is a little bit dependent on what you need, but there's 2 that I absolutely say you probably should try to get. The sword is the one you probably could pass on, because it's Assault plus Stinger. And unless you're facing dark enemies, this is pretty much a large assault. So, you could pass on this one. But if you're still trying to build up your assault, go for it, because it's still 2 skill effects. Now, depending on what you may have, if you're like me and have a few Union Event axes, you can skip this special sword, which is a glaive. Again, it looks like a scythe, but you can skip this if you have a few weapons that can give you exceed. Otherwise, you probably should get this. And you could make a glaive grid out of it if you really want to, but it is assault exceed. This staff is the one I was talking about earlier. Very, very good. It is Grace plus Vigor. What Grace is Defender plus Ascension. Vigor, self-explanatory, because I've explained it multiple times. If you're trying to make use of Vigor on a light grid, this is probably one of the weapons you need to get. Unless you're like me and have Vishnu's weapon at Final Break. That also gives Vigor, but it also gives Defender and Assault. But that combined with this actually gave me quite a bit of Vigor, along with the Light Guardian. So I'm sitting at about 30% Vigor. That's a noticeable difference considering how high my Assault already is, thanks to the Guardian add-on. Now, Thunder's Sword is the same case as a Light Sword. If you're facing light enemies, then it counts as 2 weapons, basically. If you're not, then it's pretty much a large assault. Treat it like the light sword situation. Get it if you don't have anything better. But there is something better anyways that you probably should aim for anyway. This Dark Gun. Pride plus Strength. So you're pretty much getting Pride, Assault, and Defender. Practically 2 assaults and a Defender. Much better than this large assault and the medium Stinger. So if I were you, I would probably not even bother with the light sword and the dark sword unless you're aiming for a sword grid. That's the only time I can think of you getting them. But this arcane weapon for dark is Defender plus Resilience. Now, looking into Resilience, it's pretty much Assault, Defender, and Ascension. Resilience is pretty much Assault plus Ascension. This could be very good, because to my knowledge, the only real dark healer for among the SSR I remember was Osiris, and she doesn't heal for that much. Ascension will help her greatly. It will help her greatly. Now, the add-ons themselves, I'm not going to go over the ones we don't have, and I've covered the same general effect, but keep in mind, it's going to be pretty expensive if you get these guys. There's canvas that you need and treasures. Except for the Phantom one. The Phantom one's the exception. My suggestion to you, try to grind all this out normally if you can. But if you are going to use an SSR brick on them, use no more than 2. Because just those 2 would cut out over half the grind right there. So, me personally, I would probably just use 1 to cut out 1/3 of the grind. That's the only reason you would probably use an SSR brick on these guys. Otherwise, just try to grind them out normally. If you can eventually rack up the canvas, you're good to go, because the treasures will fall in the line eventually. Guardians seem to reliably die. Once people learn how to fight them, they seem to reliably die. It's the canvas that might be tricky, because the Ragnaroks right now are arguably harder than the Guardians. So, who knows. But I know for this one, she'll increase pretty much Stinger based on break limits, the wind one. The light one is attack power, so pretty much assault based on break limit. And the dark one is combo rate based on break limit. So they'll be very helpful, even if you have somebody that's like needs other sub-slots like Mana or Cerberus or Anubis. Like the ones that need it would be Cerberus, Leviathan, Needhog, Hanuman, Monogarmer, and Anubis. These guys can still complement them even if they're not main. But I do know for a fact that the best setup for any grid is probably to set up and have at least one of these Guardians maxed out in your sub-slots for each respective element. You can even use them all mixed together too if you really want to, because each of them comes with a very good buff. So there's that. But keep in mind that it's going to be very, very difficult to actually start getting Guardians when you start advancing, because you're going to need a lot more canvas, you're going to need a lot more treasures. If you're not like one of those hardcore grinders, it's going to take a while. Especially considering the fact that you do need canvas to get fourth break for your characters too. I mean fourth slots and fifth slots for them. Because if you don't have those extra accessory slots, you cannot get accessory effects. Me for one, I don't have a single fourth slot, but I managed to get Hagif to pretty much stage 3. So there's that. But other than that, the Phantom one's going to have her own little trade item, basically, and she's not that great. I mean, she will sip and come with a decent buff, but compared to her main effect for other people, it's not that worth. If you're going to get her, she's a sub slot at best. Otherwise, she may just be a grinding mule, because what she does is give a drop rate increase no matter what. But the catch is that you have to have 3 different elements on your team, as in the front 5 people. You have to have 3 elements in order for her to give her effect, and it's an attack increase up to 100%, but it's attack increase across the board. It's splitting your elements on your teams, and the stronger grids happen to have single element focus, so unfortunately she's not going to help too much. I mean, if you can pull off something with somebody like, say, SSR Diablos, then she'll definitely help out a lot, but she's pretty much a grinding mule at most. Now, you could put her in the sub slots, though, because of the fact that she'll give burst gauge to everybody based on the break limits. I think it's either 10 or 15 when she's maxed out. And then, depending on these old specific Phantom treasure drops she gives, you can probably trade for her pretty quickly. It's just the fact that her raid might actually be a little bit tricky, too. Because just as a sneak peek from before this next video, her raid is going to end up... It's going to be a bit of a race against the clock if you don't have damage cut. Because when she does all her nukes, she'll start giving herself buffs. And then when she got all the buffs she needs, she'll nuke you one more time, but it will do phantom damage, meaning you cannot elemental resist this thing. You'll have to damage cut it. And it will be dealing well more than your HP should probably reach. Because me, I could probably get about maybe 30,000 HP with the right setups. She'll still do double that with no damage cut. So it'll be very, very dangerous. But anyways, they don't show it here too. But there's other things you can trade the treasures for. And they happen to be premium gacha tickets, Dragonic Eye Shards, and Orichalicon. They might be worth trading for if you can actually spare the treasures. I wouldn't worry too much about the Orichalicon if you're clearing guild order, because you should be getting like 5 every 2 weeks anyways if that's the case. But it could give you extra depending on your grinding amounts. It may be worth getting the Dragonic Eye Shards, because that will give us a lot more access to them, and it's based on each type of treasure too. So the more Guardians appear, the more trades we get with that stuff. I think the Phantom one may or may not have that, but I'm not fully sure just yet. But the elemental ones, like the light, the darkness, the wind, the fire, the thunder, the water, all of them will get the same trade list for that. It's just using different materials, so that will just increase the output. So that's like, if I remember correctly, you get 3 Dragonic Eye Shards per element. By the time all that's out, that's 18. That's almost 2 Dragonic Eyes right there. So it could be worth it. Not to mention gacha tickets are the same case, so you'll get more extra pulls, possibly get lucky and get some more stuff. You never know. And if you really want to grind it out, you can get a crap ton of Orichalicon to the point where you may not even end up using it all. So there's that too. So Guardians are actually worth grinding for that as well. And it's nice to know about that. And eventually, when we get raid coins, where we get a raid trade list too, Guardians alongside the Ragnarok catastrophes will give the most raid coins. So they'll greatly help for that too. They'll even have a specific item where it's a very low chance to drop, but will greatly help towards getting a 4th tier soul, when that's a thing as well. So keep that in mind. And right now too, I also have to mention, if you're having trouble getting Holy Stars, Guardians have a very good chance of dropping that. They also can drop R rarity Grails, which is the better weapon enhancement version for R. So you can still get some very good stuff just randomly fighting them. It's worth doing. But anyways, that's all for this video, guys. This has been a long one, and you see why I pretty much split it into 2 parts. Part 2 is going to come out whenever we get all of the Guardians. So I'll be covering Fire, Water, Thunder, and Phantom in that one. And some of the stuff I'm probably not going to cover again. So just reference this video if you want to know some of the stuff you're getting. But anyways, that's all for this. More of this game is going to come soon, guys, and take care.